They told me I wasn't even allowed to mourn him. My own father. That's what my stepmother said when I showed up at the hospital. Her voice was sharp, rehearsed, cold as ever. He didn't want you at his funeral, she added, like it was a gift she was giving me. But the lie cracked the second I found the pocket watch. It was my father's. Heavy scratched, always clipped to his vest. He used to say it was more than just a watch. He said it would tell me the truth when the time came. And when I opened the back, a tiny USB drive dropped into my palm. That's when I knew. My name is Clara Whitmore, and my father didn't die of natural causes. He was silenced. And the last thing he ever did was leave the truth in my hands. If you've ever been shut out of someone's life by lies, if someone tried to erase you like you never existed, this story is for you. Tell me, what would you have done in my place? Leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more stories just like this one. When the call came, I was in the middle of a client presentation. It was a Tuesday morning, ordinary, uneventful, until my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me step outside. Miss Whitmore, the voice said. This is Dr. Carroll from St. Vincent Hospital. I'm very sorry. Your father, Edward Whitmore, passed away this morning. I remember the hallway spinning, my chest tightening. Cardiac arrest, the doctor added. He was gone before the paramedics arrived. Cardiac arrest. My dad was 60, not a day older in spirit. He swam every morning. He still ran his biotech company like it was a startup. I'd spoken to him last week. He'd called to ask about a vulnerability in one of his software systems. We'd laughed. We'd argued, sure, but we laughed. So no, none of this made sense. I'm on my way, I told the doctor, but before I could hang up, he hesitated. Your stepmother, Veronica, is already here. She's handling the arrangements. Of course she was. Veronica and my father married 5 years ago. Back then she was his legal assistant, precise, polished. And in less than 2 years she became the woman who turned him against me. I didn't even see it happening at first. It was little things, missed calls, shorter emails, fewer dinners. Then contracts I helped draft suddenly changed. Projects I created were reassigned. Until one day, I wasn't part of the company anymore. I still remember the last board meeting I attended. I spoke. My father didn't even look up. By the time I got to the hospital, I was half numb. But the moment I walked through the doors, I heard her. Clara, you shouldn't be here. Veronica stood at the entrance like she owned the place. Black dress, impeccable makeup, dry eyes, not even pretending. He's my father, I said. Was she corrected? And he made it very clear in the end. You are not to be involved. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a typed letter on company letterhead, no less. I, Edward Whitmore of sound mind, hereby state that my daughter Clara Whitmore is not to attend my funeral or partake in any posthumous arrangements. It had his signature, at least something like it, but it felt wrong, forced. I'd seen my father's real signature since I was a child, on report cards, on birthday cards, on every contract we'd ever signed together. This one looked deliberate, as if someone had practiced. This isn't real, I whispered. Veronica didn't flinch. If you show up at the funeral, security will remove you. Your father was clear. I stood there frozen, my chest burning, my fists clenched. What pain, I asked. We were fine until you. She leaned closer, voice like poison. Until I showed him what you really were. A parasite. A threat to his company. A girl who only called when she needed funding. It wasn't true, and she knew it. When she called security, I didn't fight it. I let them walk me out. But as I stepped into the parking lot, the grief started to break apart, splitting open into something colder. Rage, suspicion. I knew something was wrong. Because just a week ago, my dad had been laughing on the phone with me. And now, I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. No, I wouldn't let her take everything. If she wanted me gone from the funeral, fine. But she couldn't stop me from finding the truth. And I knew exactly where to start. Dad's old office. And the watch he always said I'd understand when the time was right. Well, time just ran out. Whitmore Biosys looked the same as the day I left. Glass walls, stainless steel. A lobby that smelled faintly of cedar and control. It was early evening, quiet enough to slip in unnoticed. Ron Alden was at the front desk. He'd been with the company longer than anyone. Dad trusted him like family. When he saw me, his eyes softened. "I'm sorry about your father, Clara." I nodded. "I just need to grab something from his office. I won't be long." He hesitated, then handed me a temporary badge. "Be careful. She's having everything boxed up tomorrow." I took the elevator up alone. The 19th floor was dark, motion lights flickering on as I passed down the hall I used to call home. Dad's corner office was exactly as I remembered it, except emptier. Some photos were already missing, most notably the one of him and me at my software launch event. Gone. But the desk was untouched. I opened every drawer. Nothing. No watch. No files. Just the quiet hum of electronics and the city lights blinking behind the glass. I walked to the small safe hidden behind his wall of awards. Empty. The coat closet, just one blazer. I was starting to panic. Then I noticed a single photo still on the desk. It was recent. Christmas party. My dad and Veronica. He had one arm around her waist, but no watch. That was odd. Dad never took off that watch. It wasn't fancy. Just a weathered Hamilton he'd inherited from his father. A legacy piece. He used to say, "This watch has survived 3 generations. You'll get it someday, Clara, but not until you need it." I never understood what he meant. Until now, I remembered something. My old office, 2 doors down, technically converted into a storage room now. I hurried there, pushed past the stacked boxes and unused monitors. In the back corner, an old filing cabinet. I knelt down, yanked open the bottom drawer, false bottom. Still intact. Dad helped me build that compartment when I was 19. We used it to hide prototypes and devlogs. And right there, wrapped in an old company t-shirt, was the watch. My heart clenched. Voices echoed in the hallway. Veronica had probably sent security again. I stuffed the watch into my bag and walked out like nothing happened. Ron saw me leave. Didn't say a word. Just a nod. Back at my apartment, I sat on the floor, heart pounding. The watch felt heavier than I remembered. I turned it over in my hands, examining the leather strap, the clasp. Then I saw it. A faint bulge behind the clasp. Unnatural. I pressed it. Click. A tiny USB drive popped out into my palm. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I ran to my laptop, plugged it in. One file, a video, timestamped 2 weeks ago. I clicked. Dad appeared on screen. His hair was disheveled, shirt wrinkled, his eyes tired, anxious, but focused. "Clara, if you're watching this, something has happened to me. And knowing Veronica, she's probably already trying to keep you away." I covered my mouth, tears welling up. "I need you to know something. I never stopped loving you. Never stopped being proud of you. Everything that's happened these past few years, it wasn't real. I had to push you away, to protect you." My breath caught in my throat. He was hiding something. Something big. Dad leaned in closer to the camera. "There's a lot you don't know, Clara, about the company, about Veronica, about what she's done. This drive contains everything, every secret, every transaction." He looked over his shoulder, then back. "I hope it's not too late." The screen froze on his face, haunted but defiant. I stared at the screen, at the still frame of my father, and realized this wasn't just about grief anymore. This was about betrayal, about a cover-up, about murder. And I was holding the proof in my hands. The video resumed. Dad rubbed his face, voice lower now, almost trembling. "I've discovered something terrible, Clara. Our company is being used for something I never saw coming." He paused, exhaled slowly. "Veronica and her brother Andrew, they've been laundering money through Whitmore Biohas for years. Shell companies, offshore accounts, hundreds of millions, all hidden behind research grants and clinical trials." My jaw clenched. Andrew. He was appointed CFO barely 6 months after their wedding. I had questioned it back then, but no one listened. Not even Dad, until now. At first I thought it was external, Dad continued. But the numbers didn't lie. I followed the trail, and when I confronted them, they didn't deny it. He looked off camera again, then straight at me. "She threatened you, Clara. Said if I didn't keep quiet, you'd have an accident. Said her people could make it look like anything." I froze. Dad took a breath, steadier this time. That's why I distanced myself. "I thought if I cut you out, they'd leave you alone, but I couldn't just let them win." His tone shifted, sharper now. I've collected everything: emails, voice recordings, account numbers. It's all encrypted on this drive. Take it to Agent Helena Cruz at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He leaned forward again. She's the only one I trust. Her contact's in the files. The password is the day you wrote your first line of code. He gave a small smile, the kind I hadn't seen in years. Be careful, sweetheart. Veronica has people everywhere. Don't trust anyone at the company, not even. The video cut off. Just like that. I sat in stunned silence. Rage, fear, grief. They all twisted together, roaring in my chest. I had to do something. I had to get this to the FBI. Now. My fingers were halfway to my phone when knock, knock, knock. I froze. 3 sharp knocks, followed by a muffled voice. Miss Whitmore, NYPD. We need to speak with you regarding your father. I walked toward the door, my heart hammering. Through the peephole, 2 men in suits holding up badges, but something didn't feel right. I snapped a picture and texted it to Ron. Are these real? The response came almost instantly. Those badge numbers don't exist. Get out. My blood turned to ice. I yanked the USB from the laptop, shoved it into my jeans pocket. My bag was already half-packed, an emergency go kit. Dad insisted I keep since college. I never questioned it. Now I understood why. A loud crash. They were breaking down the door. I bolted to the bedroom, threw open the window, and jumped onto the fire escape. My hands burned against the metal, but I didn't stop. Above me, footsteps, voices. She's gone down the fire escape. By the time I hit the alley, pain shot through my ankle, but adrenaline kept me moving. I didn't go for my car. Too obvious. Instead, I ran 2 blocks through downtown traffic until I reached the subway. I ducked through the turnstile just as the train doors opened. Sliding in, I collapsed into a plastic seat, gasping. The men hadn't followed. Not yet. I took out my phone and messaged Ron again. They just tried to grab me. How far does this go? His reply came seconds later. Your father knew. Something huge. Stay low. Trust no one. Not even the FBI unless it's her. Cruz. My hands were still trembling as I powered down the phone, pulled the SIM, and dropped both into the train's trash bin. Veronica wanted to erase me completely, just like she erased Dad. But I had something she didn't. The truth. And I wasn't letting it die in the shadows. The diner looked like something out of a 70s crime movie. Worn leather booths, greasy lights, the kind of place people disappear into. I chose a booth with a view of both exits. When Agent Cruz walked in, I recognized her instantly. Late 40s, sharp eyes, cheap blazer. You look like your father, she said quietly. I didn't hand over the drive, not yet. I need to know this is real, I said, that I won't disappear next. She gave a slight nod. If what you have is what I think it is, you'll be protected, and they'll burn for what they did. I was just about to slide the USB across the table when the bell over the door rang again. 2 men walked in. I froze. Same suits, same eyes, the fake detectives from my apartment. Cruz followed my gaze. Friends of yours, Veronica's, I said under my breath. Go out the back, she whispered. Now. I bolted toward the kitchen as Cruz drew her weapon. FBI. Freeze gunfire erupted. Cooks ducked, plates shattered. I shoved open the back door only to be met by headlights. A black SUV screeched to a stop. The passenger door opened. Andrew. Give me the drive, Clara, he said, pointing a gun straight at me. You don't know what you're playing with. I backed away, heart hammering. Like Dad didn't know, he stepped forward. He made his choice. Don't make the same mistake. Shots rang out behind us, Cruz returning fire. I used the chaos to sprint left into a maze of alleys, then onto a crowded street. I dove into another subway entrance just as Andrew shouted behind me. 30 minutes later, breathless and soaked in sweat, I reached a payphone and called Ron. They found me. I can't go home. I can't go anywhere. His voice was calm. Go to the cabin, Snow Lake. No one but your father and I knew the GPS. He always said, if it came down to it, that place would be your safest ground. I stared into the fogged phone booth glass. That cabin was 3 hours north remote, no cell towers, no cameras. I took a cab to the edge of town, then 2 buses heading upstate. I hiked the last 3 miles through the woods with nothing but my backpack, my burner laptop, and the watch. When I finally reached the cabin, it was just as I remembered. the porch swing, the carved initials on the beams, the silence. I unlocked the door with the key under the step and collapsed onto the floor. I was safe for now. That night I powered up the laptop and opened a file called Kill Switch. It was a program, one click, and every document, every audio file, every photo would be sent to 200 global agencies and press outlets, simultaneously. But it needed 2 encryption keys. One was Dad's. The other was mine. I stared at the code and realized he had designed the second key in my style, my syntax, my habits, even my variable names. He didn't just trust me, he counted on me. Dad didn't leave me a farewell. He left me a mission. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside the cabin sent my heart racing. I checked the door locks 3 times, then a 4th. At 2:30 a.m., I heard the sound of tires on gravel. I grabbed the revolver Ron had given me, crept toward the window, and peeked out. It was Ron, alone. He stepped out of his truck slowly, arms raised slightly. "Your father told me about this place," he said gently. "Said if you ever came here after he was gone, I was to bring this." He held up an envelope. I opened the door, keeping one hand on the gun. "Prove it's really you." He gave a tired smile. "Your 10th birthday. You crashed the company's backup servers trying to program a countdown clock. Your dad let you hide in his office for 2 days until he could fix it himself." I lowered the gun. He handed me the envelope. Inside, a handwritten note from Dad. It was just a string of numbers, his encryption key. "He told me to wait until you found the drive on your own," Ron said. "Told me not to interfere until you were ready." I nodded, clutching the paper like it was oxygen. Then Ron's voice dropped. "There's more. Andrew's dead. Shootout with FBI near the border. But Veronica, she's trying to move funds offshore. She's desperate. You have one shot." At 2:50 a.m., Ron drove me into the city. We parked a block away from Central Park. "He trusted you more than anyone," he said, handing me the revolver again. "Make it count." I slipped through the darkness, the laptop warm under my arm. The GPS coordinates Dad had left pointed to a spot near the reservoir, quite hidden. Agent Cruz was already there, standing under a twisted elm tree, her arm still in a sling from the diner ambush. "He was working with us for 6 months," she said quietly, "building the case from the inside. We had him under protection. But they got through. I pulled out the USB. Everything's here, but the kill switch needs both keys." Cruz nodded. "Let's do it." A rustle behind us. Too late. Veronica stepped out of the shadows, gun raised. "Touch those keys and I'll put a bullet through both of you." Her voice was no longer polished. No more sweet veneer, just venom and madness. All his drama, she spat. "We could have had everything. Edward built the company, I just perfected it." "You corrupted it," I said. "You killed the man who loved you." Veronica's eyes flared. "He chose weakness, you. He threw everything away for sentiment." She waved the gun. "Now hand me the drive." Cruz edged her hand toward her holster, but Veronica caught the movement. "Don't, I will shoot her first." I opened the laptop. "I'll need to enter the keys directly. Do it slowly." I typed my key, then reached for Dad's. Veronica leaned closer, eyes fixed on the screen. That's when Ron stepped from the trees behind her and pressed the barrel of his revolver to her temple. "Drop it," he growled. Veronica froze. Then her hand trembled. The gun clattered to the grass. Cruz moved fast. Despite her injury, she tackled Veronica, cuffed her hard to the iron bench nearby. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Veronica screamed. "There are others, they'll come for you." Cruz tightened the cuffs. "They're already gone. Andrew's dead. The FBI has their accounts frozen, and in 10 seconds, the rest of your empire is going up in smoke." I entered Dad's code, the second key. The final line, the screen blinked. Kill switch initiated. Files began uploading across encrypted servers, Interpol, IRS, Europol, the SEC, every media outlet listed in Dad's network. Every shell company exposed. Every bribe. Every fake trial result. Every dollar. Veronica went silent. For the first time, she looked scared. "You lose?" I said softly. The next morning, I stood outside a church in Seattle. Dad's real funeral. Open, public. Mine to plan. Veronica was already front-page news. Tech widow arrested in billion-dollar crime ring. Biosys stock plummeted 40%. Federal investigations were already underway. I walked to the casket alone. Dad's watch was in my hand. "I got your message," I whispered. "You were right. You were always right." I placed the watch inside, closed the lid gently. Behind me, Cruz waited in silence. "The DA wants to meet you," she said. "About biosis. The board's asking if you'd consider returning, not just as your father's daughter, but as CEO. I didn't answer right away, because standing there, all I could think about was that moment Dad smiled in the video and said, "Only you, Clara. Only you could finish this." And I had. I didn't answer Cruz that day, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't ready. For the first time in years, I had space to feel everything. The rage, the relief, the grief that had been stolen from me by a woman who wore pearls while erasing people. I stayed at the lake house for a week. I cleaned the dust, hung our old fishing rods back on the porch wall, and every night I opened Dad's encrypted emails, reading the fragments he left behind. Blueprints, ideas, notes to himself about me. "She's better than I ever was," he wrote once. A line that broke me gently. 2 weeks later, I stood in the biosize boardroom. Veronica's chair was gone, Andrew's office sealed. The company was bleeding but alive, and they wanted me to lead. I didn't promise to save it. I promised to change it. The first thing I did, cut every contract linked to the shell networks. The second, reinstate every scientist and developer who'd been sidelined for optics. Dad believed in research that saved lives. So would I. Not because I wanted to be CEO, but because this company was his legacy and mine. The day we held the internal memorial for him, I placed one framed photo on the wall. Not one with the board. Not an award. Just him and me on the cabin porch, laughing. Underneath, I had a small plaque engraved for Edward Whitmore, who taught me to code, who taught me to fight, who never stopped believing in me. Sometimes the people who try to erase you are the ones most afraid of your truth. But truth has a strange way of surviving, in memories, in code, in a watch passed through 3 generations, and sometimes in a daughter they couldn't silence. What would you do if you held the evidence that could expose the very people who tried to destroy your life? If you've ever been cut out of your family, your career, or even a loved one's memory, leave a comment. I'm still here. And don't forget to subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more powerful stories that bring justice to those who were once silenced.